Imagine for a moment you're shopping online. You're looking for that perfect gadget, maybe some new noise-canceling headphones.
Okay, got it.
And your friend, who lives across town, happens to be looking for the exact same pair. You both find them, you both click buy, literal same instant.
Right.
But then maybe you compare notes later and the price they saw. It's wildly, bafflingly different from the price you saw. How would that make you feel?
Confused, definitely. Probably a bit frustrated.
Yeah, frustrated, maybe even feeling a little bit cheated.
It's a feeling that cuts deep, doesn't it? It really challenges our basic expectation of, a fair market, a transparent one where a price is just a price.
And that feeling, that sense that the market is operating in this deeply personal, often kind of murky way, well, that's right at the heart of what we're diving into today.
On the deep dive.
We're unpacking a really fascinating, and I have to say, for some, quite unsettling report. It's titled The Price of You, an investigation into the real-time commodification of economic psychology. It's by Rick Spare.
Quite a title.
It is. And this deep dive is all about how the digital marketplace is, well, radically changing the whole concept of a price tag, replacing it with something much more fluid, opaque, and frankly, deeply personal for every single one of us.
So it's no longer just the price, it's your price, calculated just for you.
Precisely. And our mission today is to explore the intricate mechanisms behind this. What are the implications? What are the consequences, maybe unexpected ones, of this huge shift?
Okay.
We're going to delve into how these incredibly sophisticated algorithms are constantly building these detailed psychological profiles of you listening right now, often to extract the absolute maximum value from every single transaction. It's a world where the main question for sellers has shifted, hasn't it? It's moved from a pretty straightforward, what is this product worth, to something much more granular and maybe intrusive. What will this specific human pay for it?
And Rick Spear's report, it's our guise for this. It gives us the language, the precise lexicon, and a really deep analysis to help us understand this new reality we're all kind of swimming in, often without even realizing it.
So let's unpack this. Our journey starts in what the report calls the new digital bazaar. We need to understand this fundamental shift from fixed prices to these personal valuations.
Right.
Because, for most of modern history, the idea of a fixed universal price for something was just normal. The simple price tag, we totally take it for granted.
It's hard to picture commerce without it now, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you're right, for centuries, it was all about haggling. You think about ancient marketplaces, bustling souks, everything was negotiable.
Exactly. You'd walk into a market and the price was whatever you and the seller could hammer out, right?
Yeah.
Based on your skill, their shrewdness.
That's really...
But then, late 19th century, places like Wanamaker's Grand Depot in the U.S., they really pushed the fixed price tag. And this was, well, revolutionary. It brought efficiency, sure, but also a real sense of transparency.
Yeah, big deal.
In theory, at least, everyone got the same offer. It created this theoretical level playing field.
And it was a huge step for retail, streamlined everything, built consumer trust.
Yeah.
But from the seller's side, that fixed price was always a kind of compromise.
How so?
Well, while it was efficient, it inherently left value untapped. Some customers, would have happily paid more. Others, maybe they valued it less or just had less money. They were priced out completely.
Ah, right. So the single price, convenient for us, wasn't perfectly optimized for their profit.
Exactly. But businesses didn't just accept that. They tried to get around it, even back then, with early attempts at what we'd call price segmentation.
Okay, like what?
Think about airlines. That's a classic example. For decades, they've adjusted fares based on things like how far ahead you book or if your trip includes a Saturday night stay.
Right, the Saturday night rule. I always wondered about that.
It was a pretty rough way of trying to separate, the price-sensitive leisure traveler from the business traveler who might book last minute and doesn't care about staying over the weekend. They likely have a higher willingness to pay.
Which was actually pretty clever for its time, but still broad strokes, right? Like using a big paint roller.
Exactly. Then, boom, the digital revolution. Suddenly, you've got the internet, mobile phones everywhere, big data, powerful analytics. This just shattered those old limitations.
So companies can now collect and crunch massive amounts of really granular data about individuals.
And this is key. This is not just advanced haggling. It's a whole new market structure.
What defines it?
It's defined by this profound information asymmetry. The seller now holds this incredibly detailed dossier, essentially, on the buyer's psychology, their habits, their likely willingness to pay.
And often the buyer, me, has no idea that the price I'm seeing isn't the real price, but a price calculated just for me.
Precisely. You're often completely unaware. It fundamentally shifts the power dynamic in the transaction.
Okay, this brings us to something really crucial the report emphasizes. Getting the terms right. Because lots of terms get thrown around interchangeably, right? And that causes confusion.
It really does. And that confusion, as the report points out, can actually serve to obscure what's really going on. It lets companies frame potentially intrusive strategies under these sort of benign-sounding labels.
Like dynamic pricing versus personalized pricing, people use those almost like synonyms sometimes.
All the time. But they are fundamentally different. And understanding that difference is absolutely key to grasping the issues here.
Okay, let's break it down. Let's start with dynamic pricing. What is that exactly?
Dynamic pricing is when businesses set flexible prices based on current external market factors. The really important part here is this. While the price might change frequently, maybe even minute by minute,
Yeah.
at any given moment, the price is the same for every single consumer looking at that offer. It's about the overall market state, not about you as an individual.
So if I go online right now, search for a flight, and you do the same thing from your computer, we should see the same price.
At that exact moment, yes.
But if we both check again an hour later, it might have changed for both of us because, say, demand went up.
That's exactly right. The algorithms behind dynamic pricing are looking at things like overall supply and demand shifts, what competitors are charging, current inventory levels, even the time of day, the season. Local events like a big concert or game can affect it.
Okay, so like Uber or Lyft's surge pricing, that's a good example, right? It rains or it's rush hour, prices go up to encourage more drivers. That hits everyone trying to get a ride at that moment.
Perfect example. And generally, people kind of get it, even if they don't like it, because it feels linked to a visible condition. The rain, the traffic.
Yeah, it's somewhat transparent.
Or airline tickets getting pricier as the departure date nears and seats fill up. Or hotels charging more during holidays. In all these cases, the price shift is a reaction to market conditions, not based on who you are personally.
Okay, that's dynamic pricing. Based on the market, same for everyone at that moment. But what about when that price does change just for me, when it feels like the price is reacting to me clicking around? Is that personalized pricing or surveillance pricing, as the report calls it?
That's precisely it. Personalized pricing is the stark contrast. It's the practice of setting different prices for the exact same product or service to different individuals at the very same time. And it's based purely on data specific to that customer.
So it's entirely about who I am and what some algorithm infers about my economic situation or my psychology.
Yes, it's all about you.
So back to those headphones. If I'm looking, my friend's looking, same time, the algorithm decides, hey, this person seems like they'll pay more, and boom, it shows me a higher price than my friend, right then and there.
That's the mechanism.
Yeah.
And the data ecosystem fueling this is just vast and deeply personal. It includes your entire purchase history, naturally, but also your browsing behavior. Not just what pages you looked at, but how long you lingered, what product features you zoomed in on, your search queries, your geographic location from your IP address or phone, GPS, inferred demographic info like age, gender, maybe estimated income level, even the type of device you're using to shop.
Wait, hold on. My device type? Seriously? So if I'm browsing on a shiny new iPhone, they might assume I've got more cash to splash than if I'm on like an older Android phone.
That's a commonly cited example, yes.
Yeah.
The assumption, or inference, is that the device signals something about your potential willingness to pay.
That feels really invasive.
It can be. The report mentions travel websites potentially showing a higher flight price to someone searching from a MacBook versus a budget PC, or an e-commerce site tracking that you keep looking at some shoes but don't buy them.
Yeah. What happens then?
The algorithm might infer you're interested but price sensitive. So it triggers a personalized 10% discount, visible only to you, maybe in an email the next time you visit, just to nudge you over the line.
So it's targeting my hesitation.
Exactly. And we know companies are actively doing this. Delta Airlines, for example, has been very public about experimenting with an AI-powered system specifically designed to tailor airfares to individual travelers based on their booking history and other behaviors.
Okay, that's a huge difference from just reacting to market demand. It feels fundamentally different. And underneath both of these strategies, dynamic and personalized, is this broader concept the report calls algorithmic price discrimination.
Yes, that's the unifying mechanism. It's the wider economic and technological practice of using algorithms to process all this data, market data, personal data, and set different prices for the same thing.
And the ultimate goal, especially with personalized pricing, is aiming for something economists call first-degree price discrimination. Sounds ominous.
It's the theoretical holy grail for a seller, essentially. It means charging each individual customer the absolute maximum price they're willing to pay, their WTP, for that product or service.
Wow, so they capture all the value.
They capture the entire consumer surplus. That's the difference between what you were willing to post and the price you actually paid. Normally, you get some of that benefit. With perfect first-degree price discrimination, the seller gets all of it.
And digital technology makes this more possible now.
Massively more possible. Fueled by big data and machine learning, algorithms can slice and dice consumers into incredibly fine-grained subcategories, getting closer and closer to treating each person as a market of one, charging them their unique maximum price.
And a really key feature of this in the digital world, the report stresses, is the profound opacity. It's incredibly hard for us as consumers to even know this is happening to us, right?
Exactly. How would you know? You don't see the price offered to the person next door, or even the price offered to you 5 minutes ago under different browsing conditions. There's no easy way to compare.
So there's this huge information imbalance.
Fundamental to the model. The seller knows so much about you, and you know very little about how your price was determined. And the logical endpoint of all this is, well, the very idea of a single market price starts to dissolve. It becomes an anachronism.
Because every transaction is potentially unique.
Potentially, yes. Calculated by an algorithm just for that person at that moment. And when that shared reference point for fairness, the market price disappears, that's when you get that feeling of being manipulated, maybe even betrayed that you mentioned at the start. There's no common reality to check against.
Okay, so let's quickly summarize the key differences again, just to make it crystal clear. We have dynamic pricing versus personalized pricing.
Right.
For dynamic pricing, the primary goal is balancing supply and demand, responding to market conditions.
Correct.
The pricing basis is external market factors, overall demand, competitor prices, inventory.
Yes, market level data.
It targets the entire market. Everyone sees the same price at that moment.
Uniform at any given point in time.
And transparency. Generally visible or understandable, like surge pricing being announced or seeing seat availability dwindle.
Relatively speaking, yes.
Now, personalized pricing. The primary goal is maximizing revenue from each individual, capturing their unique willingness to pay.
Extracting maximum value from the individual.
The pricing basis is individual customer data and behavior browsing history, device type, purchase patterns.
Your personal digital footprint.
It targets the individual consumer. Each person might see a different price at the exact same time.
Tailored to the person.
And transparency. Inherently opaque. You're usually unaware it's happening and you can't easily compare.
That opacity is crucial to its operation.
That distinction is so important as we dig deeper. And extract value feels like the right term because the report calls this next section the engine of extraction. Let's pull back the curtain on how these algorithms actually predict and maybe even influence what we'll pay.
Right. At its heart, personalized pricing relies on this really sophisticated technological setup designed to predict that maximum price you, the individual, will tolerate. And it's not a one-off calculation. It's a continuous cycle. Data harvesting, building a profile, predictive modeling, feedback. Round and round it goes.
Okay, so the foundation is what the report calls the data ecosystem, harvesting the digital self. This isn't just basic demographics, is it?
Oh, far beyond that. It's comprehensive, it's continuous, it's collecting incredibly granular behavioral signals, contextual signals.
Yeah.
Things you might not even realize are being tracked.
So what kind of data are we talking about? What's the really valuable stuff for them?
Top of the list is your behavioral data. This gives them direct insight into your actions, your intentions, your complete purchase history, obviously, but also your browsing activity, which product pages you visit, how long you linger on each one, what specific features you examine or zoom in on, your specific search queries, what words did you use, your click-through rates on ads, your history of abandoning shopping carts. That's a big one. And the report even mentions tracking your mouse movements on a web page.
Mouse movements. Seriously, to see if I'm hesitating.
Potentially, yes. To gauge interest, uncertainty, decision friction. It's like they're trying to read your digital body language.
Wow. Okay, what else?
Then there's demographic and inferred data. This includes basics like your location, from IP address or GPS, and demographics like age and gender. Sometimes you provide this, sometimes it's inferred. But it also gets into more sensitive territory.
Like
Things like your estimated income level, your credit score range, maybe even whether you have dependents. This data often isn't collected directly by the seller. It's purchased from third-party data brokers or inferred through complex modeling based on other signals like where you live or what sites you visit.
So they're buying data profiles about me from other companies.
It's a huge industry, yes.
Yeah.
Then you have contextual data. This is about the where and how of your shopping activity. We already touched on device type, that new MacBook, suggesting higher willingness to pay.
Right.
Also, the time of day you shop, the day of the week. Even your referral source matters. Did you click through from a price comparison site, suggesting you're price conscious, or from a luxury fashion blog, suggesting maybe you're less so? All these context points feed the model.
Okay. Behavioral, demographic, contextual. What's left?
A really prized category: loyalty and first-party data. This is the data a company collects directly from you through things like loyalty programs or their customer relationship management (CRM) system.
Why is that so valuable?
Because it's usually clean, reliable, and provides a complete record of your entire history with that specific brand. Your repeat purchases, how you responded to past emails or discounts. It allows for incredibly accurate modeling of your lifetime value and your specific price sensitivity to them. It's their internal report card on you.
Okay, so they have mountains of this raw data, behavioral, demographic, contextual, loyalty data. How does that get translated into knowing what I'll pay, into that economic and psychological dossier you mentioned earlier?
Right, that's the next crucial step. From data to profile. Raw data isn't enough on its own. The algorithms need to synthesize it into predictive profiles. This usually starts with segmentation.
Grouping people.
Yeah, basically putting consumers into broader buckets based on shared characteristics. You might be labeled a frequent browser but rare buyer, or a part abandoner, maybe a high-value loyalist, or a discount seeker. This initial grouping allows them to apply different baseline strategies to different types of customers.
So they sort me into a category first, then they get more specific.
Exactly. Then they move to the individual level with propensity modeling. They build models to predict your specific propensity to pay or the probability that you'll actually buy something at various different price points.
So they calculate odds.
Kind of. For example, the model calculates the likelihood that offering you a 5% discount versus a 10% discount will secure the sale. The goal is always to offer the smallest possible discount necessary to get you to convert. Why give you 10% off if 5% would have done the trick?
From a business perspective, that makes cold, hard sense. But it feels a bit clinical. And then we get to psychological inference, which sounds even more intense. This is where they really try to get inside our heads.
This is where it gets really fascinating and maybe a bit unsettling. The algorithm isn't just looking at what you did. It's trying to infer your state of mind from your actions.
Like how?
Okay, say you repeatedly search for the same flight over several days. The algorithm interprets that pattern as a signal of urgency, right? Maybe inelastic demand, you need that flight. So it concludes you can probably sustain a higher price.
Because I seem desperate.
Essentially. Or if your browsing history is full of luxury goods, or you always use the latest high-end devices, that's used as a proxy for affluence, suggesting lower price sensitivity.
And the opposite, like if I keep abandoning my shopping cart.
Right. A pattern of loading up a cart and then leaving the site might be interpreted as a signal of price sensitivity. What happens next? Maybe you get an email the next day with a small, personalized discount offer for the items in your abandoned cart.
Trying to lure me back.
Exactly. The system is constantly translating your digital footprints, your clicks, your searches, your pauses, into a set of actionable assumptions about your psychology, your intentions, your financial situation. It's not just what you do, but what your behavior implies about your inner state.
That is incredibly powerful. And all this number crunching and predicting is driven by some serious AI, right?
Okay.
What kind of tech are we talking about here?
We're talking a whole suite of advanced machine learning models. It's not just one simple program. Think of it like a toolkit. You've got foundational models like regression models, linear and logistic, which are good for basic predictions like how price affects sales volume or the likelihood of purchase at a given price.
Okay, the basics.
Then you have things like decision trees and, more powerfully, random forests. These are really effective for that segmentation piece we talked about. They build tree-like structures of if-then rules to capture complex, non-linear relationships in the data. A random forest combines many decision trees for higher accuracy.
Getting more complex.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And for really massive, complex data sets, you see neural networks, including deep learning. These are unparalleled at finding subtle patterns and correlations that other methods might miss entirely. The report even mentions things like Bayesian neural networks, which can estimate the uncertainty in their own predictions, helping manage risk.
So they even know how confident they are about ripping me off? Setting my price.
Aha. Well, about predicting your willingness to pay, yes. There's also reinforcement learning, RL. This is fascinating. RL agents learn through continuous trial and error. They literally experiment with prices on users like you, observe the outcomes, did you buy, did you leave, and gradually learn the optimal pricing policy over time. They adapt constantly.
So I'm basically part of a live experiment every time I shop.
In some cases, potentially yes. And finally, there are specialized techniques like uplift modeling. This tries to figure out the causal impact of an intervention, like a discount. It identifies the persuadables, the people who will buy only because they get the discount, so promotions can be targeted precisely at them.
Why only them?
Because you don't want to waste discounts on the sure things, people who would have bought anyway, or the lost causes, who won't buy no matter what. Uplift modeling helps focus the incentive where it will actually change behavior and generate an additional sale.
It's incredibly targeted, so all these clicks, these hesitations, every purchase, we're constantly, unknowingly feeding the beast, training the very algorithms designed to optimize their profit from us.
That's precisely what the report argues. This whole technological apparatus, data collection, profiling, modeling, it's not static. It's a dynamic, self-improving feedback loop. Every interaction you have gets captured, fed back into the system, used to retrain and refine the models. They get progressively better, more accurate at figuring out your individual breaking point, the maximum you'll tolerate paying.
Which creates this constantly widening gap, this escalating information and power asymmetry between the seller and me, the buyer.
Exactly. And here's where it takes another significant and perhaps more troubling turn. The report highlights a critical evolution. These algorithms aren't just passively predicting your willingness to pay anymore. They're moving towards actively seeking to influence and even inflate it.
How can they do that? Isn't my willingness to pay just what it is?
Well, the classical economic model assumes your willingness to pay, WTP, is stable and rational. But behavioral economics has shown us very clearly that our WTP is actually quite malleable. It's heavily influenced by cognitive biases, our emotional state at the time, context, and various misperceptions.
Okay, so algorithms can learn to exploit those biases.
Precisely. An advanced algorithm can learn which psychological vulnerabilities you might have and then tailor the presentation of the price or product to exploit them.
Like those countdown timers or only two left messages.
Those are classic examples, yes. Manufacturing urgency using scarcity bias. Or using social proof, 300 people bought this today, to manipulate your perception of value. But it goes deeper.
Deeper how?
The report discusses algorithms identifying consumers who might be prone to systematically overestimating a product's future benefit or underestimating its future costs. Think about, say, a gym membership or that expensive exercise bike. Many people buy them with a highly optimistic, perhaps unrealistic belief about how often they'll actually use them.
Guilty as charged on the gym membership front.
Many of us are. The algorithm, by analyzing data from millions of users, can learn to predict this pattern of overestimation for certain types of products and certain types of consumer profiles. And then it sets a personalized price based not on the actual utility you're likely to get, but on your perceived inflated value at the moment you're clicking buy.
Whoa. So if the algorithm figures out, I think I'll use that Peloton every single day, even though my past behavior suggests I won't, it charges me more based on my fantasy.
That's the idea. And the report calls this harm amplification. Because when this kind of misperception is actively exploited, it's not just you making a potentially poor purchasing decision. You suffer an actual financial loss.
How so?
You end up paying a price that's higher than the true utility or value the product ultimately provides you. Wealth is effectively transferred from you to the seller, purely based on them exploiting a cognitive error or bias you have. The algorithm has successfully monetized your self-deception.
That is pretty grim. It really shifts the business model, doesn't it? It's less about meeting existing demand and more about actively manufacturing demand, or at least capitalizing on inflated perceptions of it.
That's a key insight from Spear's report. The profit-maximizing firm now has a direct financial incentive to design its algorithms specifically to seek out and target these psychological vulnerabilities. Your cognitive flaws become their revenue stream. The algorithm stops being just a pricing tool and becomes an instrument of, well, psychological manipulation designed to engineer a more profitable outcome for the seller.
Which brings us back to that efficiency paradox revisited.
Mhm.
You mentioned earlier that economists sometimes argue price discrimination can increase efficiency, but this sounds like it could do the opposite.
Exactly. If algorithms are systematically targeting these demand-inflating misperceptions, then personalized pricing can actually reduce overall economic welfare.
How?
It encourages economically inefficient transactions. It identifies and targets marginal consumers, people who are on the fence. It nudges them into buying something where their perceived benefit at the moment of purchase is just high enough to meet the personalized price, but the actual benefit they'll derive is lower than the cost of producing the product.
So society overall loses out.
Yes. From a purely rational, objective standpoint, that transaction shouldn't have happened. It leads to an overallocation of resources to producing those goods, resulting in a net loss in social welfare. The supposed efficiency gain from selling to more people, eliminating deadweight loss, can be completely wiped out or even reversed by the inefficiency created by these value-destroying transactions based on manipulation.
So the assessment of whether this is good or bad really hinges on what the algorithm is targeting. Is it stable, rational preferences, or is it these demand-inflating misperceptions?
That's the crucial distinction the report makes. Targeting stable preferences is mainly a distributional issue. Who gets the money, the buyer or the seller? But targeting misperceptions is actively harmful, both to the consumer who overpays and potentially to the overall efficiency of the market.
And this all circles back to the report's point about the word personalization often being a euphemism. The public promise is always about an enhanced consumer experience, better recommendations, tailored offers, things we like.
Right, making things more relevant and convenient for you.
But when these powerful personalization technologies are applied specifically to pricing, that promise often gets inverted, doesn't it? Personalized pricing is frequently designed explicitly to find the highest possible price an individual will tolerate, which actually minimizes their value from the transaction, transferring it instead to the seller.
It flips the script. And it's not just about the price itself. The report mentions research from Carnegie Mellon University showing that even seemingly harmless, personalized ranking systems on e-commerce sites, the order in which products are shown to you, can subtly lead to higher overall prices for consumers.
How does that work?
By steering consumers towards certain sellers or products, personalized ranking can reduce effective competition between sellers on the platform, allowing prices to creep up across the board, even without direct personalized pricing being applied to any single item. It's a more indirect harm.
So, the more an algorithm understands me, the better it can extract value from me.
That's the uncomfortable bottom line.
Right.
In this context, personalization really does become a euphemism for extraction.
Okay, let's make this even more concrete. Let's look at, in the wild, case studies in algorithmic price personalization. Because these aren't just theories, right? These strategies are being used right now by major companies.
Absolutely. These cases reveal a whole spectrum of how these algorithms are deployed and the kinds of harms they can cause. Let's start with a big one, Amazon.
Amazon's Project Nessie. I remember Amazon getting some heat way back in 2000 for charging different prices for the same DVDs. But this Nessie sounds like something else entirely.
It really is. Details emerged from the FTC's recent antitrust lawsuit against Amazon. Project Nessie wasn't just about setting Amazon's own prices optimally. It was an experimental algorithm, specifically designed to test market price leadership.
What does that mean?
The algorithm would systematically raise prices on certain products across Amazon's site. Then, crucially, it would monitor whether competitors, who often use automated pricing software to track and match Amazon's prices, would follow suit and raise their prices too.
So a test balloon. If the competitors followed, Nessie kept the higher price.
Exactly. If the competitors raised their prices, Nessie held the line at the new, higher price level. If they didn't follow, the algorithm would quickly revert the price back down, minimizing Amazon's own risk of losing sales.
Wow, so what's the allegation?
The FTC alleges that this wasn't just price optimization. It was effectively a tool for tacit collusion. By systematically probing and leading prices upward, Nessie could allegedly inflate prices across the entire online marketplace, not just on Amazon.
And the impact?
The FTC claims this practice generated over $1 billion in excess profits for Amazon by causing consumers to overpay not just on Amazon, but at other online retailers who followed Amazon's lead. Just in April 2018 alone, The system was reportedly used to set prices for over 8 million items that customers purchased. It shows how these algorithms can potentially manipulate market-wide price levels, raising serious antitrust concerns that go way beyond simple one-to-one price discrimination.
$1 billion. That's staggering. Okay, let's shift gears to the gig economy. Uber's dynamic pricing. They always frame it as surge pricing, a transparent reaction to supply and demand.
That's the public narrative, yes, but the system has evolved significantly. Uber moved away from a relatively transparent model based purely on time and distance traveled. They implemented an opaque upfront pricing system.
Right, where you get a fixed price before the ride starts.
Exactly. But the calculation behind that fixed price given to you, the rider, is completely undisclosed. It's a black box.
And what have researchers found when they've tried to peek inside that black box?
There have been some major academic studies, one from the University of Oxford looking at the UK market, another from Columbia Business School focusing on the US. Both analyzed millions and millions of trips, and their findings were remarkably consistent.
What did they find?
They found that the rollout of these more sophisticated, opaque, algorithmic pricing systems coincided with, number one, higher average fares for passengers.
Okay, so we pay more. What about the drivers? Are they benefiting?
That's the surprising part. The studies also found, number two, lower inflation-adjusted earnings for drivers. The Oxford study, for instance, calculated a drop in average hourly earnings before costs from over 22 TOUs down to just over £19 after the new system was fully implemented.
Wait, passengers pay more, drivers earn less. Where is that extra money going?
It appears to be going to Uber itself. Both studies found, number three, a significant increase in Uber's take rate. That's the percentage commission the platform keeps from each fare.
How much did it increase?
The Oxford study found the median take rate climbed from around 25% to 29%, but with some trips having take rates over 50%. The Columbia study saw a similar trend in the U.S., with the average take rate rising from about 32% to over 40%. Both studies also noted that Uber seemed to take a disproportionately higher cut from higher-value trips, like longer rides or airport runs.
That's a substantial increase in their cut. So while Uber maintains its system is fair and just reflects market conditions, the academic consensus seems to point towards algorithmic price discrimination being used to systematically extract more value for the platform, squeezing both customers and drivers in the process.
That's the core of the controversy, yes. The opacity allows for this variable take rate, which benefits the platform.
Okay, one more case study. The travel industry. Delta Airlines and the frontier of surveillance pricing. Airlines have used dynamic pricing forever, right? Prices change based on how full the plane is, how close to departure. This sounds different.
It is significantly different. Delta is positioning itself at the forefront of experimenting with true personalized pricing, or what critics are calling surveillance pricing. They've partnered with an Israeli tech startup called Fetcher to test an AI-powered system.
And what does the system do?
Its stated goal is to offer airfares tailored to you, the individual. They're testing it now and have plans to expand it to potentially 20% of their flights by the end of 2025.
A unique price for every single person, calculated by AI.
Unlike traditional dynamic pricing, which looks at aggregate demand for a flight, this system explicitly leverages personal data about the traveler to estimate their individual willingness to pay. We're talking about your past booking history with Delta, your browsing behavior on their site, potentially the type of device you're using, maybe even inferred income level, all crunched by AI to calculate a unique, personalized fare just for you.
And Delta's happy with the results.
Apparently so. Delta's president publicly described the AI partner as a super analyst that was yielding amazingly favorable unit revenues.
Amazingly favorable for them, I bet, which probably means less favorable for passengers. What's the public reaction been?
Pretty significant outcry, actually. U.S. Senator Ruben Gallego went on record calling it predatory pricing. He accused Delta of using AI to find your pain point and squeeze you for every penny. Consumer advocates and even the FTC have raised alarms about companies weaponizing our personal data against us in this way.
Has Delta responded?
Delta denies using sensitive personal information, like race or income, directly. However, their openly stated goal of pricing for the individual clearly signals a strategic shift towards this kind of hyper-personalized, data-driven pricing, moving beyond traditional airline revenue management.
Okay, let's quickly recap the impacts from these cases. Amazon's Project Nessie used price leadership testing, allegedly leading to artificially inflated market prices across the board, over $1 billion in alleged overcharges, raising concerns about tacit collusion.
All right, market-wide impact.
Uber's dynamic upfront pricing shifted to opaque, real-time calculations with variable take rates. The documented result: higher fares for passengers, more price uncertainty, lower inflation-adjusted earnings for drivers, but significantly increased revenue for Uber itself.
Platform extraction.
And Delta Airlines' surveillance pricing experiment uses AI analysis of individual traveler data to generate personalized fares. The potential risks: price gouging based on perceived willingness to pay, erosion of trust and transparency, while generating those amazingly favorable unit revenues for the airline.
Individual targeting at its most advanced, potentially. These aren't just fringe examples. They represent major shifts in core sectors of the economy.
Which leads us perfectly into the next section: the tangled web of law and ethics, navigating the regulatory and moral maze. It feels pretty clear that the technology here, the algorithmic pricing, has raced ahead of our legal and ethical frameworks. Existing laws often feel inadequate.
That's a critical point the report makes. Many of our laws, especially in antitrust, were written for a completely different commercial-era think factories and railroads, not algorithms and data brokers. They often don't map neatly onto these new digital practices.
Let's start with antitrust law. The main U.S. law seems to be the Robinson-Patman Act of 1936. It makes it illegal to discriminate in price for commodities of like grade and quality if it harms competition. Sounds like it should apply, right?
You'd think so on the surface, but it runs into several major hurdles in the modern context. First, notice the wording, commodities. The Act explicitly applies only to the sale of tangible goods, not services.
So that immediately excludes huge chunks of the digital economy where personalized pricing is rampant: ride-sharing like Uber, streaming services, maybe even Delta's flight pricing since it's a service.
Exactly. It carves out a massive portion of the problem right there. Second, the Act was primarily designed to protect businesses from unfair price discrimination. Think small mom-and-pop stores getting undercut by big chains buying in bulk. It talks about harm to competing purchasers.
So it's hard to argue that individual consumers, like me and my friend buying headphones, are in competition with each other in the way the law intended.
Precisely. It's a difficult legal argument to make under the traditional interpretation of Robinson-Patman. And third, historically, this act has been pretty much dormant for decades. Enforcement was rare, and it was widely seen as somewhat archaic.
But didn't you say the FTC is showing renewed interest?
They are signaling that, yes. But its applicability to consumer-facing personalized pricing, especially for services, remains really tenuous and largely untested in the courts. Because of these limitations, the modern antitrust focus, when it comes to algorithms, has actually shifted more towards tackling tacit collusion, the Project Nessie scenario.
Where algorithms help competitors coordinate price increases without ever actually talking to each other.
Exactly. That seems to be where regulators see a clearer path for intervention using existing antitrust principles, or where new legislation like the proposed Preventing Algorithmic Collusion Act is being targeted.
Okay, so antitrust law is tricky. What about data privacy laws? Since personalized pricing runs on personal data, laws like GDPR in Europe and CCPA in California must play a role, right? They seem like an indirect way to regulate this.
They are definitely a key battleground, yes. In the European Union, the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, offers a couple of potential angles. Article 22 is interesting. It grants individuals a right not to be subject to decisions based solely on automated processing if that decision produces legal effects or similarly significantly affects them.
And a personalized price could be seen as similarly significantly affecting someone.
Potentially, yes. A higher price certainly affects you, but the exact scope of Article 22, especially regarding pricing, is still quite controversial and hasn't been firmly established by court cases. It's not a clear-cut prohibition.
What about the Consumer Rights Directive, CRD update in the EU?
Right, that's more direct. The updated CRD now explicitly requires online sellers to inform consumers when the price being shown to them has been personalized based on automated decision-making.
So they have to tell you. That sounds good.
It's a step towards transparency, but critics argue it's pretty weak. The disclosure often just says the price is personalized, maybe in the fine print. It doesn't explain how it was personalized or what data was used or give you any recourse. It's information without real power.
Okay. And what about in the U.S., specifically California with the CCPAC PRA?
These laws give Californians strong rights: the right to know what data companies have, the right to delete it, and the right to opt out of its sale or sharing. But the really interesting part is the non-discrimination dilemma.
What's that?
Both CCPA and CPRA include a crucial clause. Businesses cannot treat consumers differently, including by charging them a different price just because they exercise their privacy rights, like opting out of data sharing.
Oh, I see the conflict. If opting out of data sharing means I don't get a personalized discount that someone else does get, am I being charged a different price, a higher one, because I exercise my privacy, right?
That's the million-dollar question. It creates this direct tension between the practice of personalized pricing, which relies on using data, and the non-discrimination principle in privacy law. This conflict is largely unresolved legally and poses a huge compliance challenge for businesses operating in California.
So the existing laws are a bit of a patchwork, full of holes and uncertainties. But you mentioned a new wave of regulation trying to tackle this head-on.
Yes, some lawmakers are trying to pass legislation specifically targeting algorithmic pricing. For example, starting in July 2025, a New York state law will mandate a very clear and conspicuous disclosure right near the price. This price was set by an algorithm using your personal data.
Wow, that's pretty blunt.
It is. And that same law also explicitly prohibits using data related to legally protected characteristics like race, gender, religion to set different prices.
What about California, still leading the charge?
They're trying. Multiple bills have been proposed recently. One, AB 446, aimed to prohibit surveillance pricing based specifically on data gathered through electronic surveillance. Another, SB 384, was called the Preventing Algorithmic Price Fixing Act. And at the federal level, there's the proposed Preventing Algorithmic Collusion Act, which, among other things, would require more disclosure about pricing algorithms and ban using non-public competitor data to train them.
So there's definitely a legislative movement trying to catch up. But beyond the legal complexities, the report dives into the ethical fault lines. These feel almost more fundamental: fairness, transparency, autonomy, and this concept of digital redlining.
Absolutely. These are the core moral questions. The practice is just widely perceived by many consumers as fundamentally unfair, especially the loyalty penalty when you find out that as a loyal long-term customer, you're paying more than a brand new customer for the exact same thing. That feels like a betrayal.
Yeah, that can destroy trust instantly.
Irreparably, sometimes. And transparency versus opacity is central. The whole business model, particularly for personalized pricing, thrives on that information asymmetry, that opacity. Consumers are kept in the dark, unable to verify if they're getting a fair shake.
Some argue algorithms are less biased than humans, though.
That argument is made, yes, that an algorithm doesn't have personal feelings or prejudices. However, the report cites research suggesting this very detachment can be dangerous. Because it feels less personal, consumers might be less likely to sound alarm bells regarding behaviors they would normally deem unjust if a human were doing it. The lack of a human face can mask unfairness.
And then there's the erosion of autonomy. If algorithms are exploiting our cognitive biases, our psychological weak spots, are we really making free choices anymore?
That's the deep ethical concern. When the system is designed not just to meet your needs, but to leverage your vulnerabilities for profit, the consumer shifts from being an autonomous agent making informed decisions to being a target whose weaknesses are being exploited. It undermines rational choice.
And perhaps the most dangerous ethical risk: digital redlining.
This is a huge one. Even if an algorithm isn't explicitly programmed with data about race or ethnicity, which would be illegal discrimination,
Yeah.
it can still learn to use proxy data, things like ZIP codes, browsing patterns associated with certain demographics, even language use that are highly correlated with those protected characteristics.
So it learns bias indirectly.
Exactly. And the result can be digital redlining, where consumers in already disadvantaged communities, often minority communities or low-income areas identified by proxies like ZIP codes, are systematically and algorithmically charged higher prices for essential goods and services, like groceries, insurance, or loans. This doesn't just reflect existing inequalities, it actively exacerbates them.
That's incredibly worrying. It sounds like trying to regulate this involves juggling competing goals, what the report calls the regulatory trilemma.
It really is a trilemma. You have three desirable but often conflicting goals: market efficiency, consumer welfare, and data privacy.
How they conflict.
Well, as we discussed, price discrimination can theoretically enhance market efficiency by allowing more transactions to happen. But it directly costs consumer welfare by extracting all the surplus value. So maximizing efficiency can harm consumers financially.
Okay, efficiency versus welfare. What about privacy?
The extensive data collection needed to power these highly efficient and extractive personalized pricing systems runs directly counter to principles of data minimization and privacy. So protecting privacy by limiting data collection might hinder the efficiency gains of personalization. Protecting consumer welfare by limiting extraction might also reduce the incentive for that data collection. You can't easily maximize all three simultaneously.
Which helps explain why the regulations we have are often partial solutions, like those disclosure mandates in the EU and New York.
Exactly. The report suggests these are likely weak remedies on their own. Simply telling a consumer your price was set by an algorithm doesn't really empower them. They still don't know why it's that price, what data was used, or how to challenge it. It risks becoming mere fair washing, creating a superficial appearance of transparency without changing the underlying power imbalance or preventing potential harms.
So, given this complex mess, the lagging laws, the ethical quandaries, the trilemma, what's the way forward, the report must offer some ideas in charting a path forward, recommendations, and future outlook. What can we do? What should regulators and the industry itself be doing?
It really requires a multifaceted approach. Starting with, for the consumer, the report suggests strategies for what it calls digital self-defense. While systemic change is crucial, individuals can take steps to mitigate the effects and reclaim some agency.
Okay, what can we actually do? Give us the tips.
First, think about data obfuscation and anonymization. This means regularly clearing your browser cache and cookies that erases some of the history they use. Using a virtual private network, a VPN, can mask your geographic location, preventing location-based price adjustments. And using your browser's incognito or private mode can stop your browsing history within that session from being used to infer urgency or build a short-term profile.
Okay, make it harder for them to track me and build that dossier. What about changing my behavior? Strategic shopping behavior.
Yes, you can try to leverage the algorithm's logic against them. We talked about abandoning shopping carts. That's a well-known tactic that often triggers discount offers via email later. Instead of going straight to a merchant site, try using price comparison engines first. This signals to their algorithms that you're a price-sensitive shopper, which might lead to them offering you a lower price. And setting price alerts through third-party tools lets you wait for the price to drop to a level you're comfortable with, rather than buying on impulse.
So playing their game a little bit, and then, of course, exercising legal rights.
Absolutely. If you live in a place with strong data privacy laws, like the EU or California, use them. Submit those formal requests to companies. Show me the data you have on me. Delete my data. Opt me out of the sale or sharing of my personal information. The more people do this, the more pressure it puts on companies.
Okay, those are things individuals can try. What about the bigger picture? For regulators, what should a more effective approach look like? Simple disclosure isn't cutting it.
Definitely not. The report argues regulators need to move beyond disclosure to substantive rules. This means establishing clear prohibitions. For instance, banning the use of certain highly sensitive data categories for pricing altogether, or explicitly prohibiting the use of known proxies for protected characteristics, like ZIP codes being used to infer race, in pricing algorithms.
Setting hard lines. What about checking under the hood? Algorithmic auditing and accountability. How can they audit these complex black box systems?
It's challenging, but necessary. Regulatory bodies, like the FTC in the U.S., need both the legal authority and the technical expertise to audit these systems. This involves developing frameworks and tools that allow regulators, or independent auditors, to examine the inputs, the logic, as much as possible, and critically, the outcomes of these algorithms to check for discriminatory patterns or anti-competitive effects. The proposed Preventing Algorithmic Collusion Act includes provisions for this kind of auditing authority.
And what about those personalized rankings we discussed? Should regulators look there too?
Yes, the report suggests regulators should also regulate intermediary platforms and ranking systems. The Carnegie Mellon research showed real consumer harm can come just from manipulated search or product rankings, even without direct price discrimination. Policies could explore requiring large platforms to offer users options for unpersonalized rankings, or at least transparently disclose how rankings are weighted.
That could make a big difference in platform fairness. Anything else on the regulatory front? Innovative policy instruments.
One interesting idea floated is price range capping. This wouldn't ban personalization outright, but it would set limits. For example, a rule might state that the highest personalized price charged for a product cannot exceed the lowest personalized price by more than a certain percentage, say 20% or 50%. This tries to strike a balance, allowing some efficiency gains from personalization while preventing the most extreme forms of price gouging and ensuring some level of equity.
So allowing some flexibility but putting guardrails on it.
Interesting.
Interesting. Okay, finally, what about the companies themselves? For industry, what does an ethical path look like?
Businesses face a choice. Short-term gains from aggressive, extractive pricing versus building long-term customer trust. The report urges them to prioritize long-term trust. This means doing a serious cost-benefit analysis that weighs the immediate revenue boost from pushing prices to the limit against the potential for irreparable brand damage when customers feel betrayed.
Easier said than done when profits are on the line, maybe.
Perhaps, but essential for sustainability. They also need to embrace ethical AI by design. This means proactively adopting ethical frameworks before deploying these systems. Things like transparency, where possible, explainability, rigorous documentation of data inputs and pricing justifications, and conducting regular internal audits specifically looking for bias and discriminatory outcomes.
Building ethics in from the start.
Exactly. And fundamentally, they should focus on value-added personalization. Use all that customer data to genuinely improve the customer experience, better product recommendations, more relevant content, faster support things that build loyalty, rather than using it primarily to figure out how to charge more, which erodes loyalty.
So use personalization to deliver value, not just extract it. Makes sense. Looking ahead now, what's the future outlook? The road to 2030, is this going to get even more intense?
The dynamics are only likely to become more complex. One really fascinating potential development mentioned is the rise of agentic AI on the consumer side.
What's that?
Imagine AI-powered shopping agents, or bots, acting on behalf of consumers. These agents could autonomously scour the web for the best prices, potentially even negotiate automatically with seller algorithms, and use sophisticated data obfuscation techniques to protect the user's privacy and prevent personalized price hikes.
Wow, a battle of the algorithms. My bot versus their bot. That could potentially rebalance the information asymmetry, couldn't it?
It absolutely could. It's a potential future check on seller power. But at the same time, expect hyper-personalization as the competitive norm. This trend isn't going away. As AI and machine learning tools become cheaper and easier to use, hyper-personalization likely won't be just for the tech giants. It'll become a standard competitive practice across most of retail. Offering the right product at the right personalized price to the right person at the right time will be a key differentiator.
So more personalization, not less. And I guess that means a continued evolving and fragmented regulatory landscape.
Almost certainly. We'll likely see this patchwork of state laws in the U.S. continue, maybe with some federal action, creating a really complex compliance environment for businesses operating nationally or globally. Expect continued legislative debates and regulatory pushes as policymakers wrestle with these foundational questions about fairness, competition, and privacy in 21st century digital commerce. How these debates get resolved will really define the rights and responsibilities of both buyers and sellers in this new digital bazaar for years to come.
Well, this deep dive has certainly peeled back quite a few layers on how our digital marketplace is really working underneath the surface. That familiar price tag, as we knew it, really does seem to be gone, replaced by this invisible personal valuation designed specifically to maximize what you, the individual listening, will pay.
And the algorithms aren't just passive calculators anymore. They're increasingly designed to influence our psychology, to nudge us towards accepting that higher price point.
It is definitely a lot to process, isn't it? It fundamentally changes how you might think about clicking that Buy Now button next time.
It represents a profound shift in the power dynamic, moving away from a notion of a transparent market towards one where your perceived psychological state itself is being commodified and monetized.
So the final provocative thought for everyone listening, what does this all mean for you? When algorithms not only know what you'll probably pay, but might be actively trying to manipulate you into wanting to pay more than something is truly worth to you. In a market where every price could be a secret negotiation just for you, what really is the true price of trust?
And maybe, how do we as consumers start to reclaim some agency, some control in a marketplace that feels increasingly designed to extract from us rather than simply transact with us?
Questions worth mulling over long after this deep dive ends. We hope you'll consider some of the strategies for digital self-defense we talked about, or maybe just approach that next online purchase with a little more awareness. What stood out most to you from this discussion? Hopefully it's given you plenty to think about.